Hey folks, today I want to show you how I painted this wonderful piece designed by Zez Studios featuring Spider-Man fighting multiple different versions of the Hulk. First we start by putting this base together, which you can see there's a seam that we need to fill. So I'm going to show you how I do that using some acrylic mud by Ammo. What we're doing is just applying this mud over top of that crack in the resin print that we have. And this is very common, you'll find with bases, especially if you're printing them in resin, that the base is split up into multiple parts because the designer is trying to make it so that it's easier for more folks to be able to print it on a small printer. So the next I'm going to be doing some gray tones for this base, and you can use any kind of dry brush application you want to use. Here I have like a big makeup brush because it's a pretty big area, but you can also use a smaller brush. And as you can see, I'm just dabbing off the excess paint onto a paper towel that I have at my workbench. What you're doing is getting some of the paint out of the tips of the brush and only leaving the paint on the inside of the brush as you're doing this process. And what happens is the paint that's on the inside of the bristles actually will come off on a raised edge, which means you won't get as much paint in the crevices of your model. And what that does is actually create some really nice contrast when you have a dark base such as this black base that we started with, meaning the base color is black, and then we're adding in the highlights with the dry brush. So I'm using multiple shades of gray to add a gradient. So we started with a darker gray, and then we're working our way up to a lighter gray. As you can see, that I have multiple bases going because we have multiple different versions we're building today. Now you'll notice too that there's still some cracks in the very center of this that I did not fill with the mud. That's okay because we're not going to be able to see those. That's actually where Hulk's rear end's going to be, so no worries on that. What you see me doing now is I'm adding some shades in. Again, the more contrast we add, the more visually appealing it is, but I'm just adding a little bit of contrast to kind of put some lines back on there that we might have covered up with the dry brushing technique. This base is mostly going to be covered up by Hulk's massive body, so we don't need to put too much emphasis on this base, but the idea is to show basically like a road or something that Spider-Man and Hulk are fighting in, because they're usually fighting in the city and they're smashing into the road and there's dust being kicked up. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding like a little bit of brown to the dust cloud that's coming up, and the idea is just to add in some more contrast between the road that's being crushed and the cloud of dust that's being kicked up. We just want to differentiate the two, although typically the dust would probably all be gray as well. I just want to add a little bit of delineation there. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm taking a smaller dry brush and I'm actually going over rocks, because again, if you don't change the color up, it'll be really hard to see, but there's actually rocks in the dust cloud. I have plenty of content coming your way, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on these beautiful sculptures coming soon. I know so many of you have reached out to me on Discord and told me about how my work has helped you and inspired you in creating your own sculptures. So again, I hope that you come back, as I have something to teach you with every one of these models that I paint. I'd like to take a moment to share some information about my website with you in case you're a collector or maybe you're just new to the hobby. Check out my website at relentlessstormmodels.com, where you can browse a growing library of over 600 models to choose from. You can browse by the featured designers that I support over on Patreon. I also offer DIY kits and paint for those looking to get started in the hobby. Paint supplies are discounted 25% when you purchase a DIY kit. All the paint available is hand selected by me personally, so you can trust that it'll be easy to use and lead to a successful paint job. I highly recommend trying the new Ionic paint line, which are good for both brush and airbrush application. Users have called this paint the cheat code for painters, so don't miss out. With the base out of the way, now we can focus on the Hulk. We're going to start with him because he's actually the next layer of our total build. And you can see I'm using the same technique here to start. So I actually sprayed Hulk's pants here gray to start, like a gray primer. And I do use a rattle can primer for priming. And then I'm using the same light grays to create some contrast and actually bring out the texture. If we just spray painted like this blue gray that I'm about to use over top of just a gray base, it would be very flat. But the light gray dry brushing brings out the texture of the jeans shorts that he's wearing and really adds the contrast that we want. Because I can tell you this 1,000 times and you'll hear me say it a lot. Contrast is the key to getting your models to that next level, okay? With contrast, your eyes like see the model and it just does something versus a flat piece. Like a flat piece is going to look like a toy, and a contrasted model is going to look like a work of art. And it actually like pleases our brain to see the contrast if it's done correctly. And when I say that, what I mean is if it's done in a natural way that looks natural, right? If you put the highlights in the right spot and the shadows in the right spot, it's going to be very pleasing to the eye, because your brain's going to say that looks very real, and it's going to be very pleasing. So what you see I did, I sprayed this set of jeans with a gray blue color, and then this set I'm doing with Leviathan blue in the shades. So this is for the gray Hulk, I think, because he has the blue shorts. So you can see how what I did was I added contrast with two different colors. So I had more of a light gray blue, and then I used a dark blue. And then here what I'm doing is I used a lighter purple and then a darker purple. So that way we create contrast. So you create contrast by simply having a darker and a lighter color, or darker and lighter areas. A lot of folks try to use just a zenithal for this, and that works just fine. I prefer the post shading method, which means I'm creating some shading on the pre-shading with the dry brush or maybe a zenithal, but more putting an emphasis on the post shading, which is what you see here with the darker purple. And then what I'm doing is I brushed on the gray for like a little torn shirt that he has there, or rags, whatever's sticking out of his pocket, probably his torn off shirt. And then I'm painting in the parts where his skin is exposed. So like again, we have the gray Hulk and the green Hulk, so you're seeing the difference there. The blue shorts are for gray, and then the green skin goes with the purple shorts. So here's some different shades of gray and different shades of green. You can see, like I was saying, like if you want to create contrast, you want to use at least 2 different shades, a highlight and a shadow. But if you want to take it up a notch, you can go as crazy as you want. I like to stick around 3, maybe 4 at most, is a happy medium. Like, so what you see is I gave you 3 different sets of paint colors that I'm using, and I really like to use contrast paints for creating shadows if I can, but you don't have to. You can use regular acrylics as well. Since I've recorded this video, I've actually changed away from Citadels and starting using AK's new quick gens, which I have available on my site. They're a great alternative to Citadel, just a little side note. But you can see that what makes the contrast paints so nice for shading is that they blend really well, because they are a shader. They are actually like a transparent paint, so they blend really nicely. But what you can see I'm doing here is I'm putting the shadows in all the little crevices, and because I'm using a 0.3mm needle and nozzle in my airbrush, which this is actually one of the best starter airbrushes I think you can get. I highly recommend this Procon 275. This technique allows you to create contrast in those shaded areas, and it blends so well with the base tone of gray. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking a highlight coat and I'm shining it from above, kind of like a zenithal, right? A zenithal is creating light from above, as if the sun is shining down on your character, or a light or something. It's coming from a light source. And light and paint work the same way when sprayed from an airbrush. You can think of your airbrush like a flashlight. It's casting light or casting paint. So when you want to do a highlight, you want to hit those raised edges. You want to hit those areas that are standing out that the light's going to catch. And when you're creating shadows, you want to do the opposite. You want to be hitting those crevices and the areas from below where the light wouldn't hit. And what you saw I did there with the gray was the 3 different shades of gray. A base coat of gray, a shadow tone of gray in the crevices, and then a highlight to blend it all together. I highly recommend saving the highlight for last because it does a better job of blending your shadows and your base colors together. You can see I'm using the same exact technique on the green, just obviously with different green tones instead of gray. I started with a base color of green, and now I'm taking a shadow color of green and applying it in all those shadowed areas. And as I mentioned, you can use standard acrylics for a contrast look. I've had someone ask, can I water down my acrylics and get the same look as a contrast paint? And the answer is sure, if you use a medium. If you're just thinning it down with thinner, no, don't do that. Because what's going to happen is your paint is going to be too thin, and it's going to give you spider webs and things like that because it's too thin. Don't do that. If you want to use contrast paints, again, I highly recommend the 8K Quick Gens or Citadels or Army Painter, Speed Paints. They all work really well from an airbrush, and it'll give you that contrast look. The other option is to just create a darker shade of acrylic and spray it the way I'm showing you. It'll still work just as well. It'll just have a different finish than a contrast, that's all. And what you see I'm doing here with this highlight is I'm not just spraying it like a zenithal. If you take notice where the highlight is going, it's actually going on those raised edges. But if you want to blend your shadowed areas and your base coat together with the highlight, you can just simply spray it with a zenithal. Just be aware that you might lose some of those shadow details that you had meticulously put together before. Okay? So again, just showing you how the technique works the same on this foot. I wanted to show you a comparison side by side essentially of the gray and the green. The process is the same regardless of your color. Okay, now you can get creative if you want to go really crazy and you can change up the colors. Like instead of doing gray, I could have done like, you know, a dark blue in the shadows of the gray. You can get that crazy, and if you want to, it's your model. Sometimes it looks really good. I know I just painted a Randy model not that long ago that has a blue base, like skin tones under the gray skin tones. So anyway, that's not this model. Let's talk about the Hulk. So what you can see I'm doing is we have a version of the Hulk that's venomized. So we're actually painting all the black parts of Venom on there. The next thing we have is the gray Hulk with a orange shirt. I actually had to look this guy up. I never saw Gray Hulk before. It's from an older comic, and he actually wore an orange shirt. I think his name was like Joe Fixer or something. You guys can tell me if I'm completely wrong. I'm no comic book expert, but I did do some research and found that he wore an orange shirt. So I actually used that Magdramoth Flame, which again, there are some AK Quick Gen variants, again, if you're interested in that. But you can see I'm using the same exact technique here, and you can see how you can really see the contrast between the pecs and the abs and all the little muscles. And when you have a big muscular character like Hulk, it's really, really cool to create that level of contrast between the muscles. I mean, the definition is what makes it feel real. It's what makes it feel realistic, and when you look at it, it just like clicks in your brain. That looks incredible, right? If we had painted Hulk just flat green, you would have said, that looks like a toy. That's not art. That's something I can go buy in a box off the shelf for a couple dollars. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a work of art. And again, I've seen amazing artists use a regular paintbrush and just go absolutely nuts with 10, 15 layers of paint to create a similar effect. And they are absolutely beautiful works of art once they get their brush strokes down and understand how to do that. I am not that good. I'm not. So there are definitely artists out there that are better than me, but I want to show you guys how you can create beautiful art with simple techniques and simple tools. You don't need to spend hours upon hours to create beautiful contrast. You can if you like, but it's not necessary. It's all up to what you want to get out of the experience of painting a model. So as you can see, I'm just recreating the same exact effect as we did on the foot on his upper torso. And I just wanted to show the differences between the gray, the green Hulk, and our venomized Hulk. Now again, there's stones that are on Hulk because he's being smashed into the ground, which is kind of funny because usually Hulk does the smashing. So now he's getting smashed by the Spider-Man. I don't know, it's an odd day in this little scene we have going on here. And quite frankly, the only one that makes sense to me is the Hulk one with the venomized Hulk one is the only one that really makes sense to me. I could see Spider-Man fighting Hulk that's venomized, but the other ones I don't really make sense. But you can see what I did was I just painted the gray stones, and then I'm dry brushing them just as I did earlier. And now all of a sudden we have that beautiful detail of those stones that are part of the scene. I painted his hair black, and you can see I'm just painting in all of his other details here on his face, such as his eyebrows in black. Just mind my hair getting into the picture there. So this part is now what I call the detail stage. So we did all the airbrushing stage. I like to do all my airbrushing up front and get that out of the way, because then between the airbrushing stage and the detailing stage, what I didn't record for you all is I do a matte varnish from a rattle can, and I let that dry out. That way, when I'm handling it, if I make any mistakes, I can easily wipe off the acrylic paint with water and it won't chew through the matte varnish that I put down. And also, it protects the paint coat that I spent hours meticulously putting down with an airbrush from my hands as I'm handling it. Now, I do wear a glove on my left hand, but I don't like having a glove on my right hand so I can have better control of my brush. If you've ever tried painting with a nitrile glove on your right hand while you're painting, or I should say your dominant hand while you're painting, for those lefties out there, it is really difficult to control because nitrile is not exactly the best at gripping. So the glove does help protect your model as well. But as I said, the most important protectant is the matte varnish that I do after I airbrush. Now what I did was I took some of that pinkish color and I put it on the gums, and what I'm doing is I'm adding this white, off-white color on the teeth. I want to create a more realistic look by making sure the gums are still there, so I'm individually painting each tooth. I also added some of that pink into the corners of the eyes to make it look like, hey, he's fighting. His eyes are bulging because he's angry, Hulk angry. And we're just adding in those little details on his eyes. Now his pupils and his coloring in his eyes, I wanted to make sure I pointed it towards Spider-Man, because he's looking at Spider-Man, he's looking at his opponent, and so he's kind of looking down. So his iris and his pupil, they're down pretty far towards the bottom right as we're looking at it here. And you can see I kind of get an outline in like a dark green, and then I'm adding in a light green kind of highlight there, and then we'll put in his little black pupils. So really big Hulk, really small pupils, but it looks pretty good. And you can see I did the same thing for all the other ones, the gray. Now the venomized one, there's a lot more, because we have to actually paint the venom portion that's kind of like swallowing Hulk here. So I will say this was by far my favorite one with venom. I mean, just again, the gray one looks incredible, I think, because it's got the gray, and when you'll see that when we get to the end, the gray just pops with the orange and the blue. It looks really good. But Venom, in terms of just like content, if you will, like, because Venom is, in the scene with Hulk and fighting Spider-Man, like, that scene just means more to me, like I say, because it makes sense. It fits the narrative. The other ones, I'm like, I don't know why they're fighting. So I'm sure someone out there is like, oh yeah, it's from this issue, from this year, and I'll be like, sure, I'm gonna trust you on that. But in this case, I just really love this Venomized version. So what you saw that I'm doing is I painted like the eye of Venom white, and it does take a few coats because I'm painting over black, so just be aware of that. When you're painting a light color over a dark color, you might need multiple coats. Then I'm using this contrast paint from Citadel. Again, AK QuickGen has an alternative for Crimson Red that'll work just as well. And I'm painting in all those gums and just making sure I touch up the teeth, because it's hard to get the brush in between the teeth. So listen, you're going to, get paint in areas you don't expect to. That's okay. You can clean it up. Don't freak out. So you get the teeth You get the gums, and it just looks really, really cool to have that Venom mouth over top of Hulk's head. There is a tongue that goes in here too eventually, I know. But before we do that, one of the things that's really, really important whenever you're doing like a mouth or like eyes, you want to use a gloss varnish over top of it so it looks wet. And that's what you see. I'm just liberally applying some gloss varnish that I use. Any kind of acrylic gloss varnish will work just fine. Now, because this is Venom always has this like wet look to him. I'm doing gloss over everything. So now you can see kind of after I brushed gloss over everything on Venom. And there's that disgusting tongue of Venom getting on there as well. So with that, we can actually put our legs on Hulk, and he is done. So we actually have our base and Hulk all done and ready to go. I want to take a moment to say thank you to my patrons that support my work. If you're interested in some exclusive content, including daily vlogs and how-to videos, so you can get better at this hobby, or perhaps you are ready to take the next step and turn your hobby and passion into a side gig and earn some extra cash, head on over to my Patreon where you can get exclusive access to extra content. Now we have our other subject to paint. We have Mr. Spider-Man himself, and you can see I'm using Atom Red here. And if you're curious like why I choose Atom or Ionic, there really is no rhyme or reason. Typically Atom paints are a little bit easier to spray just because they're already thinner, but Ionic sprays beautifully as well. So in this case I'm using the Atom Red for Spider-Man just as a base coat. And now you can see what I'm trying to do. I started with a primer of white, and I'm painting all the red parts red without a mask. I just want to get the paint down, the red paint down first, because when I paint blue over top of red, like when I mask off the red and then paint the blue, when you paint blue over red, the red parts just turn a little purple. So it'll actually kind of give you a little bit of natural contrast, though that's not necessarily what I'm going for. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You can see I'm using here Army Painter's Slaughter Red. Again, Crimson Red from AK Quick Gen, or like Flesh Terror's Red will also work for this from Citadel. The choice is yours, which one you want to use. They all work very well. But all I'm doing is creating contrast in those shadowed areas with a darker red. Okay, this red, when you look at it, you're going to think, wow, that's way too dark. But because it's a transparent paint and it's like almost like a blackish red color, it actually works perfectly, because remember, it's blending over top of your red. Now, here's what I'm doing for the blue. You can see I have the same setup. Mid-tone is in the middle. It's my blue. Or sorry, on the left is my blue. I have a highlight in the middle, and I have a shadow on the right-hand side, as you saw there. So like Prussian blue from Atom is what I'm using for the blue, because I wanted something that's dark blue but not too dark of blue. I don't want like Fantastic Four blue colors. I want Spider-Man blue colors. You can see I masked off all the red that I did earlier, and you can see where the red overspray is. It's really not a big deal, because it's all going to work into the shading that we do here in a moment. So I'm just spraying all the blue parts blue, and then we will come back and do all of the shadows and highlights. And I say again, like if you're just painting Spider-Man, you're not painting Spider-Man and Hulk, then maybe this is the part of the video that you were waiting for. So I apologize if you had to sit through Hulk because you're not interested in him, but Spider-Man is actually not that hard because he's two colors. He's red and blue, and then there's some detail painting. Most folks get a little wary of the webbing, which we're going to cover that in a moment. I'll show you a nice trick, and actually I found so many tricks. There are so many different tricks to painting the webbing. But let's go back to the blue that we're on. You can see I have everything painted blue, and then I'm adding in all these shadows with this Beowulf blue, I believe it is, from Army Painter. Again, Citadel has a beautiful blue color that's actually ultramarine blue, and I know Citadel has a color as well. So we're just adding in those shades to all the crevices, all the curves from the bottom. Again, because we know he's standing up in the air and he is coming down upon Hulk. So we want to make sure we know, again, our scene. Like, Hulk is laying on his back, so we did all the shadows in his crevice areas, but not so much like in one direction, because the ground is at his back and he's facing straight upwards. With Spider-Man, we actually do want to use more of a zenithal. As you see, as I'm doing with the highlights, I'm actually spraying almost like a zenithal from above to create that effect that the light is coming in from above, and it's blending the shadow and the base color based on the highlights that we're creating as if the light is coming from above. That is giving us that realistic look, and when we take all the tape off, this is what we're left with. Okay, there might be some touch-ups, don't worry about it. Your tape might not work perfectly, just touch it up where you can. Now, the detail painting, we have the spider on the front, we have another spider on his back, and we're just painting those with a brush. Here I'm using a number 2 brush, and I recommend you don't use anything much bigger than a 2 for detail painting unless you're doing large areas. You might want to be sure to have at least a 0 brush and a 1 in your collection as well, to be able to do some of the finer details and do like the edges of like this spider. But with it being black, it doesn't take much to finish off that piece in 1 or 2 coats. The red spider on the back, however, is going to take multiple coats. And again, I'm using the same color red as I used as his base color on the red parts of Spider-Man, so it's the same red. That way it matches. Of course, we're not doing anything kind of crazy shading or anything like that. We're just simply creating that red. Now, you can go really crazy with your details and add multiple levels of contrast and shading. It all depends on the size of the detail. If it's a really small detail, I wouldn't recommend going crazy, but it's up to you. It's your model. I wouldn't go nuts with it, but if it's a larger detail, maybe you want to add some shading. Here, as you know, I'm not going out of order, I promise you. This is a different of the same model. It's just a different one. I painted 3 Spider-Men, so I did 3 sets of these webbings, and I found this little felt tip pen that worked really well. You can also look for like a Gundam marker that will work really well, but you just have to wash cleaning up, like, because it's almost like using a Tamiya panel liner. But in this case, this little felt marker was perfect because it fit right in the grooves, and I could easily just pen in everything. So the whole time, by the way, when I was painting, I did have a mask, just blue tack over top of the eyes, so I could keep that original white. So I didn't have to paint it white later. So remember, I primed in white, so I just primed in white, put some blue tack on there, and then I did my painting. And I knew there was a black ring around the eye, so I just kind of made it so that the blue tack went into that black portion, because then when I add the black details, it doesn't matter if there's red or white there, the black's going to cover it up anyway. So a little tip for you, if you can mask along an edge where it's going to be black, that's an ideal spot to mask off. And there you can see our head all finished. Here's what he looks like all assembled. And remember, I did 3 of these, and they all turned out really, really well. I was very happy with this model. Take a look at how they all turned out, and you tell me down in the comments which version is your favorite. Did you prefer the one with Venom and a scene that makes sense from a story perspective, at least for me? Did you prefer the colorful pop of the Gray Hulk? I just think the colors on that just pop so well. Or do you like the clean green Hulk and Spider-Man and Hulk are just training or something? I don't know. Whatever the story is, tell me down in the comments which is your favorite and what do you think the story is behind this scene. I'd love to hear from you all. If you like what you saw today, please don't forget to subscribe. I'd love to see you back here for the next model. And don't forget to check out my website where you can get plenty of these kits for yourself and paint supplies. I'm here to inspire each one of you to take up this hobby, try out painting. Don't be afraid to try something new. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Just pick up some paint and see what you can do. You might be shocked at what you can do with these. I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good day.